Hey, good morning. Stephen Priest with Class1ModelWorks.com. Beautiful Monday morning here in Kansas City, and I want to talk to you a little bit about containers. Now, we all know what containers are. They're fairly simple and basically a box with some exciting paint on it, and they're made by multiple companies in the model railroad market. Most of them work fairly well together. They'll nest together fairly well. But what I want to talk to you about today is not necessarily that, but how these are loaded on cars, because this is somewhat important for people to understand what can be loaded, what can't be loaded. And this is all basically in reference to the prototype, to real trains. So as we go through this process, I'm going to show you why containers are loaded the way they are and how they'll appear on an actual train. So this will help you have a kind of a mental picture of why the railroads do what they do and how they do it. So the first thing I want to explain about containers is that containers have a beefed up support system around some lifting points. And the lifting points really are the corners of the cars, and they are a standardized location. And they're basically at 20 and 40 feet. And the reason they're at 20 and 40 feet is on a 20-foot container, which this one is, obviously you're going to have your support on the outer edges of that. And if you put two of them together, like this, you end up with your points being at 20 foot and at 40 feet. And then if you go to a 40-foot container, what you'll end up with is you'll end up with those points at 40 feet or at the end of 40 feet. So that's a standardized kind of modular system. And the modularity is what is really important with containers, because the modularity allows them to be stacked together. And a good way to think of this is think about Legos. If you've messed with Legos, Legos have a very modular system where the circular and indents fit together so that you can stack Legos together. Containers are really very similar to that. And since we have 20 and 40 foot points, as you go up from there, what they started doing is they started doing overhangs from those 20 and 40 foot points. So as you go to a 45 foot container, basically you still have your mounting points are at 40 feet, right here and here, but you have extra container hanging over. And that continues as you go larger and larger. You end up with greater and greater overhangs until eventually you get to the largest containers that we're currently operating, which are 53-foot containers that give us the maximum. And you'll notice that all the way down through here, there's a 40-foot support structure, a support beam, and that's where the containers are Legoed or fit together with what we call IBCUs, or inner box connector units. And they're a little metal fastening device like a pin that fits into the hole on the corner of the container and then locks in place. So now that we've talked about the modularity of containers themselves, let's talk about how that fits into the freight car itself. So obviously, if we have a system of modular containers, our freight cars probably ought to reflect that as well, and they do. So if you'll notice on the front of the car here, you've got a point right here that looks like it's a kind of a vertical strengthener, which is exactly what it is. You'll see a couple of them here in the middle of the car at the 20-foot point, again the modular 20 foot, and then again out here at 40 foot. This particular car that we did is a 48-foot car, and so outside on either side of the of those mounting points, we have extra room here in the wells. So this can load up to a 45-foot container, which this happens to be, or excuse me, a 48-foot container, which is what this happens to be. And you'll notice with the 48-foot container in the well, now the entire well is filled. So then the question happens, well, I have this 53-foot container, what do I do with that? Well, the neat thing about double stack cars is they're designed so that you can put a container in the well and a larger container stacked above it with the overhangs sticking in the clearance areas here within the car. So there's a 48 with a 53 stacked inside of it. And this is basically how the system works. So we're going to stack, for the most part, we're going to stack our shorter containers in the car In this case, I'm going to go back to two 20-footers. They're going to stack in here. And that same 53 foot that we just had stacked will also stack on top of the 20 foots. So we have this overhang now on either end of the well cars. So this is how the modularity works, and it works through all the sizes of containers. However, let's talk about some no-nos, because there are some things you cannot do. The first thing you can't do is you can't take a 40 or a 48 or a 45 or whatever and put it in the bottom well and then stack 20s on top of it. And the reason you can't do that is containers, unlike the car, do not have a strengthening or a stiffening support point in the middle. So if you have 20-foot containers, they're always going to have to go on the bottom or in the well of the car, if the car is equipped to hold two 20s. So that needs to be brought out. And beyond that, there really isn't a whole lot of things you can't do, except for just logical things. Like you're not going to be able to put a 53-foot container in a 48-foot well car. That's just not going to work, obviously. And most people can figure that one out on their own. But anyway, so that's pretty much how it works. A couple other things that can happen that may seem interesting, and that is you can put a 48 or a 45-foot well car in the lower, and you can put a 40-foot on top of it. And the reason for that is the 40-foot container, of course, spans clear over to the support points. So this is one case when you can have a larger container below and a shorter container up on top. And these are very interesting to see loaded this way. And you'll see them periodically. I mean, it's not something that doesn't happen. It happens quite a bit. And so I wanted to point that out as well. The second thing you get a lot of questions on, a lot of people have asked is how do I face my containers? Do the doors have to be on the same end? So that would basically mean if I have cars that have doors, do the doors have to be on the same end and the blank end of the container have to be on the same end? And the answer is no. These can actually be flipped, so you have a door on one of the containers and the other end of the container on the upper lower arrangement, or vice versa. So this occurs as well, where you've got juxtaposed containers where they're flipped. It's fine, because again, the key here with containers is the 40-foot loading point, or the support point that goes through the container. And it's interesting, if you look at a lot of pictures of the container ships, if you go out on the internet and look at container ships, where they're stacking these things 10 or 15 high, all of that weight is being carried through these supports in the containers. This is a very sturdy support, strong bolstered support that runs through the containers. And that's what allows us to stack. And that's the beauty of this system. Instead of having just a single level car, we are now able to take and we can put a variety of things in the same car and build them up. U.S. freight cars, and I think worldwide too at this point, only double stack. There are no real triple stacks. The Union Pacific worked with some narrow triple stacks a few years ago, I believe for auto loading. Don't hold me to that. But they were not full height like this. If you would triple stack these, it would get very, very silly very fast, because you wouldn't have any bridge clearances. You couldn't get under any bridges anywhere. So double stack is where it's at right now. And that's some of the information on how to load them. Hey, wanted to pass along with you that class1modelworks.com, on our website, we produce the TWF10 well car. We produced 3 versions of it. 2 of them are left in stock. 1 of them is sold out at this point, and the others are going relatively quickly. We also produce Hyundai and Monon 48-foot containers in a wide variety, and have a brand new shipment coming in here shortly. So click the link down below to order your TWF10. Thank you for watching. We appreciate it. At Class 1 Model Works, we help people build state-of-the-art model railroads.